Let's talk about property taxes as they relate to buying a new home. So when purchasing a new home, let's talk about the property taxes. So whether you escrow or don't, it doesn't matter. We're going to talk about them here, and both this video is applicable to both, whether you escrow or not. So first and foremost, if you're not sure what an escrow account is, I'll put a link somewhere in here about you can learn more about it. But in short, the short version is escrow accounts are set up to have the taxes as part of your mortgage payment that you pay each month. So each month you'll pay 1/12 of your property taxes. If you waive escrows, that means that will not be the case, and you'll be responsible for paying the taxes when they come due. So in Texas, it's once a year annually at the end of the year. In October is when they come due. They're not late till after January 31st. But regardless, whether you have an escrow account or don't, what's going to happen at closing is when you buy a house, and I'm going to go ahead and just pick the month of June. Let's say the very last day of June, you're buying a home. When you go to closing, if you don't have an escrow account, even if you do or don't, what's going to happen is at closing, the sellers are going to give you tax credits, or technically the title company is the one that does this, but it's from the seller's side of the balance sheet. Like the sellers are going to give you credit in Texas, at least. They're going to give you credit from January 1 through the last day of June when you close, or whatever your closing date is. So let's say it is the last day of June, the June 30th, you're going to close. The seller on the closing disclosure, you'll see a credit for 6 months of taxes that get added to your balance sheet. So it's going to be this credit. So that's good. It helps reduce your cost, right? The reason why is because at the end of the year, again, in Texas, when taxes come due at the end of the year, you, the now homeowner, are going to pay the entire year's worth of tax bill. So in other words, the taxing authorities, they just basically want one check. They don't want a whole bunch of different checks coming from two different parties. It's just whoever owns the home when the taxes come due is going to pay that. So that's why the sellers give that credit and if you close, let's say June 15th, they're going to give you 5.5 months, right? January, February, March, April, May, that's 5 months. And then the 15 days of June that you close, that seller credit is going to be showing up on the final CD. So here's what happens. And so whether or not you escrow or not, doesn't matter. That credit's coming to you. Here's what happens. If that year, because the taxes, that credit that's given, that's a rough estimate. That's the best. The title company does their best to figure out what it's going to be, but we're all kind of guessing because until taxes get posted, and again, in Texas, that's back in October. So until the taxes are posted and known, we're taking our best guess. So what both buyer and seller agree, and they sign at closing a piece of paper that says, look, we get these are estimates. So what happens is in October, when the taxes become known, technically the buyer and seller both have the right to go back to each other and say, hey, let's square up. Now, I got to be honest, I've not heard an instance where this happens because, again, most people don't even think about it. They forget. And even if they do, it's a few bucks. And who wants to go chase down somebody and get money? But the reality is they could. So let's say the tax bill is $1,000 a month. So let's say they close again at the end of June. So it's June 30th when we close. The seller has given them a $6,000 credit at closing to the buyer because that's their half of the year, $1,000 a month. And then come October or November, whenever the taxes post, whenever they come due and they become known, let's say the real number would have been $1,200 a month, not $1,000. So it's $1,200. Well, all of a sudden now, again, the current homeowner at that time has to pay the full tax bill, and that's $14,000 as opposed to the $12,000 for the $1,000 a month. So $1,200 a month is now $14,000, 14,400, whatever, doesn't matter. But let's just 14,000, use round numbers. So if it's $14,000, the buyer technically has the right to go back to the seller and say, hey, guess what? You gave me $60,000 at closing based on $1,000 a month. It came in at $1,200. Therefore, you owe me the $200 difference times the 6 months. You owe me $1,200. So that's absolutely something that both parties sign. You got to chase it down to go get it. That's absolutely the rights. Conversely, meaning the other direction, if the tax bill for whatever reason comes in lower, let's say it's $800 a month instead of the $1,000, the sellers, if they cared enough to go look and find this out, if the sellers are paying attention and they can come back to the buyer and say, hey, I saw that, the tax bill posted, because you can see this in Texas. I can see that the tax bills are now $800 a month, which is $9,600 a year. And I paid you based on a $12,000 a year. So I need that $200 difference for that 6 months. You owe me $1,200. So again, I've been doing this since 2003. I can't tell you a story where I've heard a buyer and a seller going back to each other to go get that, but technically that could happen. But so that's when you buy a home in Texas. That's what happens with property taxes. Again, whether or not you escrow or don't escrow, this happens regardless. So just keep in mind that that's coming your direction. And again, sometimes with an escrow account, it's not going to feel you like, oh man, I got $6,000 less of fees. Without going into the details, check out what it means to set up an escrow account. It's certainly different. I set up an escrow account, they're going to charge you a bunch of money that just doesn't feel like that $6,000 is coming your direction. It's kind of a net zero, but just keep that in mind. And if you do buy a house without an escrow account, yes, it's $6,000 less today, but just remember you're gonna owe that $6,000 plus all your other taxes at the end of the year. So it feels good at closing, but it's not forever. So if you have questions, reach out to the Mortgage Mark team. We are certainly here to help answer any questions we have. Appreciate you watching. And as always, when you think mortgage, think Mark.